Hello and welcome back to Granted Gardens. Today we're hanging out in the herb bed. I've done some work in trying to trim up some of the dead stuff and trim back some of the overgrown stuff, and I've been wanting to do something for a while now. I researched a how-to video and it looked fairly simple, so today I'm going to try it. Today I'm going to try and make my own essential oils. And I'm going to take you along for the ride with me. Check it out. We just have to pick an oil that we like, a scent that we like, a plant that we like. And I think today I'm going to start with patchouli. So I've started to pick some of my larger patchouli leaves. I think that I need a really decent amount. So I'm going to try and pick off all of the larger leaves off of this plant to see if I can try and at least semi-fill this basket. Best rule of thumb when you're picking from any plant is to only take a third. If you only take a third, you won't damage the plant at all. Also, you want to make sure that you're taking from areas where there's new growth. So you can see here there's a new leaf, so I plucked the big one off. You don't ever really want to take from the top unless you're pinching back on purpose to make the plant smaller, or if you're taking off any flowers to keep it from bolting. Otherwise you want to try and leave the tops intact. So a really good example of where the best place is to pick patchouli. You can see the patchouli leaf here. It's a fairly decent size. And then right in there, you can see where there's new growth. So you can just pinch that off leave the new growth, pinch off the leaf, and that's the best way to pick patchouli. So I'm gonna keep going at this. Okay, so now that I've got a pretty decent harvest, I could probably do better, but like I said, this is my first time, so we're giving it a try. I've got a pretty decent amount here in my basket of patchouli. I just dumped it out too. A pretty decent amount of patchouli in my basket here. We're gonna move on to the next step. Okay, well, welcome to my kitchen. It's a work in progress, so don't mind all the things. But so to get into creating our own essential oils, there's a few things that you're gonna need. First and foremost, you're gonna need your plant. So we've got our basket of patchouli leaves here. You're gonna need a pan. So again, this is my first time doing this. We are learning together, but this looks to be about sufficient for what I'm trying to do, I think. I kind of tested it out and I think it'll work. So just a standard pan. Then you're going to need a weight or a brick or something that you can set in the bottom of the pan. So here we have just one of our weights that we use for fermentation. So I'm going to set this in the bottom of the pan, and I'll show you how I have this all set up in a second. Then you're going to need a heat-proof bowl. And last but not least, a lid. Okay, so this is not the lid to this pan, but it's gonna have to work. So we got a lid here. One last thing, I'm also adding in just a dishcloth. This is going to go in the bottom of our bowl, so I'll show you the setup now. Okay, so here's our setup. We've got our pan. First, we're going to take the dish towel and we're going to set this in the bottom of the pan. So this is very similar to the same kind of thing that you would do when canning if you don't have a grate. If you do have a grate, you can use that as well. Then you're going to take your brick, or in our case our weight, and set it on top of that paper towel. Then we're going to take our heat-proof bowl and we're going to set that in on top of the weight. Alright, now we just need to add our leaves. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take our leaves and we're going to tuck them in. This might be easier to do if I remove the bowl. We're going to tuck them in around the edges here. So we don't want them to be directly underneath of the bowl, just tucked around the edges. Now we're going to make some room for our bowl. We're going to set the bowl in the center here. All right, now we just need to add water. All right, I kind of tilted the bowl back a little so you can see. But now we're just going to add water in around the edges of this bowl. We're going to keep adding water until all of the leaves are completely covered. So basically the idea of our setup here is you've got the big bowl with the leaves in the bottom. Then you've got your smaller bowl in the center. That smaller bowl, it's really important that when you're pouring water in, you do not pour water into that center bowl. That center bowl needs to stay dry. So the idea is that the leaves will cook and the vapors will evaporate, and then that is where the lid comes into play. So I'll show you how to set up the lid. So this isn't really too terrible. There's nothing crazy to this. All we're gonna do is we're gonna take our lid and we're gonna invert it. So we're gonna actually set it upside down on top of our pot, okay? So now what you can see is we've got our leaves that are soaked in the water, then we've got our dry bowl in the center, then the lid, once the water starts to evaporate, it will collect on the lid, it'll come down, and then what ends up in that bowl in the center is going to be what you want. That's going to be your good extract for oil. Now, in the instructions that I initially have read, it did mention that the leaves can be done dry. Obviously I have fresh leaves, so I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I've got fresh leaves here. It also said that you can do this in a stock pot. So if you've got a greater abundance of your leaves, then you can actually put this in like a large canning pot and do a similar setup, and it should work better on a larger scale. So you will get more extract out of it. So last but not least, what we're going to do is we're going to add ice cubes to the top of the lid. The point for this is to help keep that lid, that top lid, cooled in the center, so that when the water evaporates and collects on the lid, it'll drip down directly in the center, right where your empty bowl is. So we're going to add some ice cubes. Okay, so for this last step here, we're just going to put 2 ice cubes right here on top of the lid, on top of the inverted lid, so it sits right in the center. That's going to keep it nice and cool so that it drips down. So now what we're going to do is we're going to turn this burner onto high. We want to get this to start boiling. Once we get that water up to a boiling temperature, you're going to turn it down to a simmer, and you're going to let it simmer for several hours. The longer that you let it simmer, obviously the more your extract you're going to get out of it. This is my first time, so I'll take you along step by step as I do this, but if you are following along, then at this point you just let it boil. Once it comes to a rolling boil, you turn it down to simmer and you let it sit. So we're still waiting for it to boil, but you can see how the precipitation is running towards the middle of the pot. That's what we want. Okay, so we're at about 7 minutes and it's starting to boil. So we're going to move this down to a simmer. Okay, so mistake number 1 for me. Once it started to boil, I had to take it off of the heat because when it started to boil, the bubbles were coming up and going into my center bowl. It's not ready for that to happen. That needs to happen slowly, not quickly. So I took it off of the burner. I'm going to dump out the center bowl and put it back in so that we can collect the good stuff. This isn't easy to do when I'm trying to film with one hand and not burn myself with the other. Okay. So the center bowl here has to come out and be dumped out because it was just water that was boiling over that got in, not our drips. So I literally just picked it up and poured that water back into the pot. Now we're going to put this over top and add some ice cubes. Let's try again. Okay, so at this point we can kind of see I got a decent simmer going. I'm set here on 3, so I should be fine. We're starting to get the precipitation back, and I got my ice cubes on. So from here on, we should be good. I'm gonna just let this sit. I'll come back and check on it every 30 minutes or so. Now, when you come back to check on it, the things that you're looking for is A, you wanna make sure that your ice is still there. So if you need to replace a piece of ice when you come back to check on it, you just wanna make sure that the center of that inverted lid stays really cool. And then you also want to check for water. So if you are running low on water around your edges, you can go ahead and just add more. You want to make sure that you're just not getting down to where there's no water left and then you're just cooking your leaves. You want to make sure that you keep them submerged in water. I'm discovering that trying to keep the melted water off the top of the lid and keep ice on is a bit of a challenge. So I've come up with a quick way to combat that. I'll share what I'm doing so that you're not wasting any of your extract. So I'm literally just taking a paper towel, I'm reusing it. So just a small paper towel, setting it in the center, gathering the melted ice. That water gets hot, so be careful. And then, ooh, that gets hot. And then wringing it out and coming back. So just keep doing this and then put new ice cubes on top. I am so tempted to peek. I really want to look. But the problem is that once you lift the lid, all of that moisture on the lid is going to slide off and you're going to lose it. It's not going to go in your bowl. So you don't want to keep lifting the lid. You want to lift the lid as little as possible. Okay, so it's been about 2.5 hours now, and I've been collecting as I go because, as you could see, my bowl in the center was a little wobbly, so I was worried that it was going to pour out. So I kind of collected about every 30 minutes. And I've been filling up this little container, and I'm at a solid 8 fluid ounces collected over the last 2.5 hours. So it smells good. Okay, so next step, now that we've got this, we're gonna pour this water off into a freezer-friendly container. So I just have a glass jar here. If you are reusing a glass jar though, you just wanna make sure that if you used it for like pickles or something, it's cleaned really, really well and that there's no scent in it, because if it smells, then that's gonna change the smell of your oils. Okay, so now we've got our liquid in our glass jar. The next step is to put this in the freezer. What we're gonna do, set it in the freezer until the majority of it freezes. All of it should not freeze. There should be a separation with a bit of unfrozen liquid at the top. That unfrozen liquid is your essential oils. So we're gonna put this in the freezer. I hope I have enough for this to work. Like I said, this is my first time. So we're gonna put this in the freezer and we'll check on this probably tomorrow and see what it looks like. Okay, so obviously it's a different day. It's about 2 days later, and we're gonna check up on our frozen water and essential oils mix to see what's going on. Okay, so here it is. Obviously things went a little wrong. So we're gonna sit down and kind of evaluate this process and talk about what we could have done differently. Okay, so let's take a look now at what we've got. So this obviously did not turn out the way that we wanted it to, for a few reasons. Number one, glass jars are not a good idea. Next time I would definitely use plastic over glass because of that. It cracked. So glass jars don't do well in freezer. I probably could have known that from the get-go. Didn't think that one through. So we've got the glass jar that's cracked. In addition to that, what we were looking for is once we froze the matter, it was going to separate from water and oil. So essentially the water would have froze, the oil would have sat on top, and it would have stayed liquid. So you could have then gone in with like an eyedropper and extracted the oil off the top, or you could, if you had enough, just pour it out, and the water would have stayed frozen, the oil would have come out with that. I've done quite a bit of research the last day or so on creating your own essential oils, and there really looks like there's about 2 different ways to do it. There's the way that we did, where you're actually extracting the physical oils out of your plants. So that's about as pure as it gets. Then I've also seen other places that instead of extracting the oils separately, they actually infuse another oil. So they'll take a carrier oil, such as avocado oil, and put it in a pan, put their leaves of their herbs in the pan, and then let that sit for multiple hours on low heat to infuse the avocado oil with the oils of the plants that you're extracting. So this way was definitely the most pure way to get just a pure essential oil out of it. Now I will say, once I put this in the refrigerator, I did peek on it a couple times, and you could easily see the oil was separating from the water. So there is oil in here. So that's why I'm saying this isn't a total loss. Essentially what I have in this jar right now is the exact same thing that I would put in my diffuser. It's essential oils, raw essential oils, mixed with water. So once this melts a bit, I would be able to just set it into my diffuser, and I should get the scent out of it. I should still be able to smell the oils that way. So with all that being said, I wouldn't say this is a win. I think this might be a fail, y'all. But we learned something along the way. So I really appreciate you guys sticking in there with me. I hope that you could see how not to do it, and then maybe learn a little bit of better ways to do it if you are looking to make your own essential oils at home. I will be posting more videos on a few different ways for me to do this, including the larger pot and just more volume, so that we're getting more oils out of it from the get-go. That way it makes it a little easier for you to tell when it's separated and such. So once the harvest is ready again, I will do another video using a larger pot. I probably won't use the freezing method. Based on the research that I did, the freezing method is just not necessary. The best way to do it that I've seen is, after you have collected the drops in the center of your bowl, you take what's in the center of your bowl, you put it into another canister, and you let that sit. Once you let that sit, the oil and the water will separate, and then you can go in with an eyedropper and take the oil off the top. The freezing part really isn't necessary. So we're going to try a few more ways to do this once the harvest is ready, and I'll be sure to videotape it and share it all with you. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to sharing more with you soon.